Lisbon. Someone opens a wooden trunk. Old. Stored away for nearly 50 years. Inside, tens of thousands of handwritten pages. Fragments, reflections, poetry pretending to be prose. All of it written by a man who died in 1935, completely unknown. His name was Fernando Pessoa, and Pessoa in Portuguese means exactly what you're thinking: person. But listen to this part. Pessoa died at 47. The trunk with his life's work was opened and published exactly 47 years later, the same age. As if the universe had waited for him to live a second life, just so he could finally be read. Inside that trunk was a book called The Book of Disquiet. When it was published, it became what many consider the most important literary work of the 20th century. Except, it's not exactly a book. It has no beginning, no middle, no end. You can read it back to front. And here's the stranger part. Pessoa isn't the author. The author is a man named Bernardo Soares, a bookkeeper, an anonymous accountant in Lisbon. Except Bernardo Soares never existed. Pessoa created him, just like he created Vicente Guedes and Alvaro de Campos and Ricardo Reis and Alberto Cairo. In total, Pessoa wrote under the names of 80 different people, 80 identities, each with its own style, its own biography, its own worldview. He called them heteronyms. They weren't pen names, they were parallel lives. And here's where the paradox begins. Think about it with me. You, right now, hearing this, how many versions of you exist inside your head? There's the you who talks to your mom, the you who flirts, the you alone in the shower replaying an argument from 3 years ago, the you that you think you are, the you that you're afraid you might be. Which one is real?
Pessoa spent his entire life trying to answer that, and the more he looked, the more the self shattered. He wrote, "My soul is a black whirlwind, a vast madness spinning around a void. And I myself, am the center that exists only because the geometry of the abyss demands it. I am the nothing around which all of this turns." You know what he's describing? Self-awareness. Not the pretty version you find in self-help books, the raw version. Self-awareness is this. You don't just live, you watch yourself living. You don't just feel, you watch yourself feeling. It's like there's an internal camera running 24/7, recording you being you, and you can't turn it off. That camera is the most precious thing you have, and the thing that imprisons you the most. Because it's what lets you love consciously, change on purpose, make a promise, and keep it. But it's also what makes you feel shame over things no one ever saw, anxiety about anxiety, guilt about not feeling guilty enough. Ever laid in bed unable to sleep because you were monitoring whether you were relaxing correctly? There you go. You've met the paradox. Pessoa lived this in extreme mode. He fragmented himself into 80 pieces, maybe because he sensed something terrifying. There is no real self at the bottom. It's like trying to film the camera itself. You point the lens at itself, and what do you see? Another lens, and another, and another. The more you try to know yourself, the more selves you create. The observer becomes the observed, who becomes the observer again. Infinite Russian dolls. Pessoa realized if you're honest all the way down, there's no floor.
Now, here's the strange part. In 1848, almost a century before Pessoa died, a man named Phineas Gage was working on a railroad in the United States. An accidental explosion sent an iron rod through his skull. It entered through his cheek, pierced his brain, came out through the top of his head. Phineas Gage didn't die. He didn't even pass out. But the man who survived wasn't him anymore. The rod destroyed a region called the prefrontal cortex. That's literally the part of the brain that gives you self-awareness. After the accident, Gage could walk, talk, work, but he could no longer see himself doing those things. He became pure impulse, no filter between desire and action, no capacity for regret, no inner narrative. The doctor who treated him wrote, "The equilibrium between his intellectual faculties and his animal propensities was destroyed. The internal mirror shattered." Think about the irony. Pessoa multiplied the mirror until it exploded into 80 reflections. Gage had the mirror ripped out by an iron rod. One stared into the abyss and wrote about it for decades. The other fell into the abyss and forgot that abysses exist. And somewhere between those two extremes, there's you. Admit it, part of you envies Gage. Imagine living 12 years, that's how long he survived, without the inner voice judging everything, without mentally replaying that thing you said wrong, without anticipatory anxiety, without having to decide who you want to be, just existing, like an animal, like a plant. Pure flow. But you know what you'd also lose? The ability to love while knowing you're loving, to choose to forgive, to promise something tomorrow and remember it tomorrow, to transform who you are because you decided to. Pessoa knew this. He wrote, "I don't know how to feel or think or love. I am a character in a novel that is yet to be written, hovering in the air, undone before ever having existed." He's saying, I've watched myself so much that I no longer know what's real. Actually feeling, or feeling that I'm feeling? Loving, or constructing a narrative about loving? And you, when you say, I'm an anxious person, are you anxious, or are you watching anxiety happen and calling it me? Because if you can observe the anxiety, then you're not the anxiety. You're the thing observing. But then, what is that thing? And if you try to observe the observer, you create another observer, and another, and another. There's no bottom. Pessoa knew this. That's why he created 80 people. Because if you're being honest, you are a crowd pretending to be one voice. There's a detail in Pessoa's story that borders on the supernatural. Inside the Book of Disquiet, there's a passage where he writes, "Perhaps one day, in a future I won't be part of, the sentences I write will be read and admired. Then I will finally have my own family, people who understand me. But I will have been dead for a long time. I will be understood only in effigy." He wrote that decades before he died, and that's exactly what happened. He died anonymous, was understood 47 years later, at the exact age he died, as if he had predicted his own irrelevance and his own redemption. So what's the way out of this paradox? Maybe there isn't one. Pessoa tried to multiply himself until he dissolved. Gage had the mirror broken and became, what? Free? Empty? Nobody knows. Because Gage no longer had the inner language to describe what it was like to be him. In his final years, there are accounts that Gage worked as a stagecoach driver in Chile. Witnesses say he seemed functional, even competent. Some neuroscientists speculate that maybe other parts of the brain compensated, that he may have relearned fragments of self-awareness, which means he spent years wandering through a world without the weight of himself, and then, slowly, that weight came back. Like waking up from a dream where you were free, only to find out you were always trapped. Phineas Gage's skull is still on display at the Harvard Museum today. The iron rod that pierced it sits right beside it. Thousands of people walk past it every year, staring at it, trying to understand, what is a person anyway? Is it the brain? The memory? The ability to observe yourself? Or is it precisely the impossibility of answering and continuing to ask anyway? Fernando Pessoa died alone in a hospital in Lisbon. His last words were in English, a language he learned as a child. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Decades later, when they opened the trunk, they found a note written by Bernardo Suarez, the heteronym. Everything is uncertain and final. Everything is part of a whole we do not know. Gage lost the mirror and became pure flow. Pessoa multiplied the mirror until he became nothing. And you? You're here, aware that you're aware of this, trapped between two impossibilities, no ground beneath you, but still searching. Maybe that's what makes us human. Not the answer, the search that never ends. Now tell me something. Remember when I mentioned Pessoa's 80 heteronyms? I want you to try something with me. Down below in the comments, write the name of a you that lives inside you. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone but you. It could be the John who pretends he's fine in meetings, the Maria who rewrites messages 19 times before hitting send, the 3 a.m. Pedro who isn't the 10 a.m. Pedro. Because when you name it, when you write it down, you're doing exactly what Pessoa did. You're looking into the mirror and admitting it has more than one reflection. Go ahead, name one of your yous, and if you're brave enough, tell me which one you're most afraid is the real one.